Okay. So,
Jessica, welcome to Art and Cocktails. I'm so excited to chat with you today about your story and your beautiful new book, which I have a copy with me here. Welcome to the show.
yay, thank you. I'm so excited. This is going to be fun.
I cannot wait. I've been looking forward to this recording all week. And for our listeners, I've got to know you through my community, the Art Queens, which has been so beautiful. But could you just tell us in a few words a little bit about you, what you do, and just what's lighting you up right now?
Yeah. So I'm Jessica, and I am first and foremost a licensed psychotherapist, which is kind of how I got my feet wet with art, which is interesting. I spent the first, I would say, majority of my 20s pursuing my education, getting my master's degree in psychotherapy, getting all the, getting through all the red tape of getting licensed and being able to see clients. And I was doing like, I really wanted to get into like the most intense aspects of mental health. I always saw myself getting as, I don't know, getting my knees in the grunt work of mental health, where it was needed the most. And so I did that a little bit too intensely right off the bat. And being the kind of hard worker and perfectionist that I was, I spent a bit too much time working, doing overnights, doing really intense assessments, and burnt myself out. Which kind of led me down a path of really needing to like regulate my own nervous system. And it was a bit before I could really see clients and feel like I was myself, which as a therapist doesn't feel good. Like you always want to show up as your most authentic and best self. And I felt like I was really forcing it for a while, doing outpatient work, and I needed a change. So I wanted to switch to seeing fewer clients, and I needed a way to regulate my nervous system. And art was kind of like, do the whole both kind of thing. Like I wanted to do the art not for anything other than myself in the beginning. And I think that's where how I got to this part of my journey and feeling as confident as I do, is that social media wasn't really a thing when I got into it. Like it wasn't, not for the artists anyways. Like Instagram was still new for artists, which was where I got a lot of the following that I have now. I think in the beginning I was doing the ink work. Not a lot of other artists were doing the fluid ink work. And I put myself out there and people started watching, and I was just doing it because it was helping my mental health, and people wanted to buy it, and I was like, okay. And one thing led to another, and I pretty much went as far as I could in educating myself in terms of fluid art. No formal training of any kind in the art world. I used to laugh at my friends. A lot of my friends were artists or architects or doing things that were artsy. And I was like, I can't draw a stick figure. Like, no way. But that was always a lie. Like, I drew and I always did things as a kid. I just had this voice in my head that was like, you're terrible. And the only way you can draw is if you look at other pictures. Now I realize that a lot of artists use what are called reference photos, and I thought that was cheating. So yeah, it just one thing led to another, and here I am, and I have a book. And it's really, really wild, stumbly, messy, honest journey. If I'm being real.
Yeah, and I love that you share the not so polished parts because I feel and I love that about yours, specifically on Instagram because that's where I see the most of you.
Yeah.
And I think we as creatives, we all fall prey to seeing everyone else's life and everyone else's work, and it's so easy to just truly look at the highlight reel, but I really admire the fact that you share the messiness and the emotion. And the other day you posted something about not hiding how you're feeling, which is a new powerful thing that
Hmm.
we, especially as women, haven't stepped into. I'm going to go back a little bit. When you first started making art, I know you were burnt out and you were overworked and you needed to reconnect with yourself. You said you started with the ink paintings. What was the catalyst for that? Did someone give you? Did you see something online? Like, how did you get started?
So it's actually really funny. And it's a really funny story. I'm sitting like under the trees and I'm looking at your painting, and it brings me back to literally the moment I found ink. I was in Costa Rica on my honeymoon. We were having a great time, but it was pouring raining. It had been raining for like 3 days. And so like my husband was napping, and I was on YouTube and I was looking, or I was on Instagram or somewhere. And I can't remember who it was at this point now, but I had seen someone doing these huge, giant ink paintings. and I couldn't figure out what the medium was. And I have to figure things out. So what is this medium? I've never seen anything so mesmerizing before. And at that point, I had been dabbling in watercolor. I really enjoyed doing mandalas and like Zentangles, things that got my brain really just focused into this state that I hadn't been able to describe yet. And so I literally figured out what it was, found out it was alcohol ink, had all of the materials I needed to do it shipped to my house when I got back from Costa Rica. And when I got home, and I have videos of me in like my little porch. It kind of looks a little bit like this, but it was like a shared porch and like an apartment building. And I was like doing ink because I couldn't do it in the house. The fumes were too much. And I was so terrible, so terrible. And so it was just this random moment. I had no interest or had never seen fluid art before. It just kind of found me, I think, when I really needed it.
That's the magical thing about art. I think so many times it finds us. Is
Yeah.
art something that you practice with your patients? And are you seeing patients right now as a therapist as well? Is that something you recommend to people? And even for those listening, a lot of our audience are artists or creatives in some way, but maybe someone has a relative that's like looking for an outlet. Is there like a baby step you recommend to someone who's looking to start making something?
Yeah, yeah. So I've been practicing art. I think my honestly, my clients and my patients have taught me more about how I wanted to show up creatively as a healer and an artist. Like I don't think I would have known that I could tap into what I tapped into at this point if it wasn't for some of my clients. I was working in a jail with locked up youth, like young men, and some of the most dangerous men in the state of Massachusetts. And they were great when we worked with me because I wanted to do creative things with them. I didn't want to sit down and make them. I wanted to, but they wouldn't. So I did what I had to do, and I brought out the art, or I brought out the things that were creative, and a lot of them did graffiti or other things that was kind of told like off limits, and we figured out ways to kind of open them up through art. And so I was like, this is like, okay, I got to keep doing this. And then when I started to do outpatient, I was working with resistant clients and clients who like didn't want to be meeting with me. And again, like art became the tool. I could have them draw something and I would know so much more about their life than I would have even if we had sat and talked in the session. And so for me, I think there's such a, and I've talked about this a lot recently, of this gatekeeping mindset that only some people can be artists, only some people can be teachers, only some people can. And I truly believe that everyone can be an artist and everyone can be a teacher. And you don't even have to have the goal of being an artist. So if you have that family member who's struggling, or you have that person in your life who's struggling and you think creativity might be an outlet, like I think joining them in it is one thing, like, presenting something creative to do together, to show them, like maybe even if you're not an artist yourself, or if you are an artist yourself, tapping into something more childlike that maybe isn't what your medium is, pulling out the finger paints, pulling out the sensory, more engaging activities that maybe someone with some severe mental health struggles might have a hard time getting into on their own. A lot of times it would be like, me pulling out finger paints with a client who was in their 40s or 50s, and them looking at me like I was, are you all right? Like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'd start getting into it with my fingers, and I would just be like, it's okay. You don't have to do it. Just watch me. Let me know what it feels like to watch me. And, it's just trying to figure out a way to have a conversation with that person, connect with that person through whatever the art making is, if they're not willing to open up otherwise. And if they're willing to open up otherwise, then just hand them some fluid mediums and say, try this. Like, I mean, the minute you try alcohol inks, you'll understand, or even anything. You've played with high flow acrylics and water, for your beautiful backgrounds. I assume that feeling, like, I mean, even with the more intense work, but just that feeling of freedom when you don't have a outcome in mind. And just saying ugly is beautiful when it's just for no one. Like, who cares? Like, it's beautiful when you've just done it.
It's so
Um,
important. Thank you so
yeah.
much for sharing that. And as an artist, when you started selling your work and, balancing that, now you have two businesses, right? Now you
Yeah,
have
multiple.
the art business and the therapy business. How important is it for you to make sure that you're still making that fun work, the ugly work that no one sees, or that even if maybe you're open to sharing it? Because I feel like in the art community, for some reason, I don't know when this happened or how, I guess it's just humanity, but we feel so much pressure. The minute something becomes our career or our passion, we all of a sudden perfectionism turns on. We no longer play. Everything's for an exhibition or a sale. What are some ways that you've been able to navigate that as you became more of a professional?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really tricky. And I'm still navigating that, I'm still figuring that out every day and realizing, that it's an intricate balance. And I think it's one, like, don't try to just make the art the income, because that, and I think I've learned that a lot from Art Queens and from your programs, is like, if the art is your only source of income, then you're really going to create a tense relationship between you and your art. And so figuring out other ways to support yourself, not having any shame and having side gigs. If you need to waitress, if you need to, bartend for a little while, if you need to, do something else to supplement what you do. I think is that part of your story, Kat? I think a little bit.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
because there was a moment and, when I just was focused on selling art because that was the story that I was told, you're gonna exhibit and all you do is art, otherwise you're not gonna be taken seriously. But what happened was then, like you said, my relationship with my art became really strained, and instead of it being a beautiful outlet and my way of expressing myself, it became like this screaming thing that kept me up at night. And and when my business what happened this is not about me at all, but I'll quickly share with our
The
listeners.
therapist in me does that. Sorry.
You need to know. What happened was I started to get ironically, when my career started taking off, I was attracting galleries, exhibitions, like even my work was selling. I had a big opportunity with a gallery to show my work, which meant I couldn't sell that work. And
Yeah.
it created so much financial pressure. I had no way of supporting myself at that time. I didn't have all the income streams that I have now. And I remember sitting in this beautiful new studio with all these galleries, all these dreams coming true. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to pay my bills? And that was a moment I was like, "I don't want this kind of life. I don't care." And
Mhm.
that's when I actually started to create, like, I started writing blogs, we wrote our first book, and, like, things kind of organically evolved into coaching. But it was because I was like, I have other gifts. I don't need to sit here and wait for painting to sell 6 months from now. By then I'll be dead." And that's
Yep.
not okay for anyone. And for some people it's prints, for some people it's different types of art. And like you said, waitressing, teaching, whatever. But I think we need to remove the shame from how we support ourselves, because our art should be protected. It doesn't matter like who wants to show it. If we're not happy with the way our practice is going, that's not a good quality of life. So anyway,
Absolutely.
I'm off my soapbox. Back to you.
No, no, and that's exactly it. Like, and I think that the shame part, like with all of it, with your first question around talking to a family member about creating art, and like it is really just throwing that shame out the door and remembering what it was like to be a kid and like just have a set of crayons in front of you. And like there was no, I mean, for some of us kids, we were a little bit still perfectionists, but there was still that feeling of like freedom and like no one's giving me a grade on this necessarily. Like art should never be graded. I think that in a way, and so yeah, I think that childlike feeling and the balance of knowing that your art, if it's selling, is important, but the minute you make it all about that, like again, like it's even like with a marriage or like a partnership, like if it's all about the money, then we know that I think that one of the biggest relationship deal breakers can sometimes is the finances. So you got to have a good
100%.
money relationship with that art. um yeah, and playing as much as you can.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Yeah.
All right, so now I have this beautiful book with me here, and I've been, it came at a perfect time because when it arrived, I know we chatted before, so I knew it was
Mhm.
coming, but I was really exhausted and I overbooked myself, which I teach everyone else not to, but I did, and it happens. We all do this. And I was like, there was like zero energy emotionally left in me. I'm like, I need to carve out time for me. And as always, books are like the universe's way of communicating with me. Like last time when I almost quit my art, I got another book that says "Make Your Art No Matter What" by Beth Pickens. And then this time I was emotionally exhausted and I got "Find Your Flow." So,
Yay.
thank you for that universal delivery.
Love
So
that.
tell me, how did this? Obviously, you have an amazing audience now on Instagram. You're an amazing professional therapist and artist. How did this idea come about? Tell us, how did you decide to write a book?
Yeah. So I've always, writing has been like my best friend for a really long time. And so I always knew I wanted to put my writing out there in some way. This is kind of that first step for me, in getting, I think, more of a text based something out there. And so I wanted to have So I'm neurodivergent. So neurodivergent meaning my brain has functions a little different sometimes. So for some people that might mean ADHD. For some people that might mean autism. For some people that just might be an umbrella term they use because their brain just has a little bit of a hard time functioning in other ways or another. And I also struggle with my mood. And so this being a therapist and struggling with those things is an interesting dual role. But I think that that's a really common role for artists. I think I would say majority of the artists that I know struggle with their brain or their emotions in some way or another, and that's often a trigger for why we create. And so I wanted to create a visual tool that would be friendly to my type of brain, and friendly to the type of brains that I work with in therapy. And so visual and supportive. I think for me, I was originally shying away from, excuse me, an art tutorial book because I felt like I talk too much. Like I wouldn't be able. I have too much to say. I don't know if I'd be able to go into to make it as condensed as an art book would require of me. And but then I really thought about it from this context of like, okay, but for people who need something visual, for people who need something that's a bit more broken down, like how else would you get your process out there? And that was where my brain was when I found the process that's in this book. Like I wouldn't have been able to have picked up like there's a book, heal your brain from art right now. It's I think Heal Your Brain on Art, or How to Heal Your Brain with Art. It's a beautiful book, but it's very text based, and it teaches you this lovely process. But I wouldn't have been able to have picked that up at that point. So for me, I wanted this book to be something that someone could pick up at any part of their journey and feel like it was accessible, and give them the tools. Even if you are a distinguished oil painter, even if you are someone who has never even picked up a paintbrush, I wanted you to feel like you were going to get something from this. And all of my students so far through my courses and through my retreats have all been people who otherwise didn't have someone to say, hey, you can do this. So yeah, and I think I spend so much time on my phone, as most of us do, and there's so much out there with our phones that there was part of me that was like, why bother? Like, there's YouTube, there's all of these great courses out there, why a book? And well, but I gravitate towards books. My shelves are littered with art books, and I go to those way more than I go to YouTube. So I was like, why not contribute to that pool?
I love that. And it's so beautiful. And I also gravitate towards books because I think there's something so healing about when we're on our phone, we are in a way available to other people's agendas, right? So when we have a book, we
Mhm.
silence that world, and that's amazing. I think I saw you post something about this once back to phones, but
Yeah.
did you take pictures of these processes or did you hire someone to do that? Because there's a lot of pictures in here, girl, and I don't know. I was just thinking about like 'cause my brain is instantly like behind you. Like, did you just document your whole life for like a year?
Yeah, it was intense. I actually used my advance to invest in camera. So I got myself an awesome camera, a whole setup. So that's like I had like my phone as like a preview screen. I had AirPlay on my TV also as a preview screen. Then I had a remote in one hand. I actually had no help and no photographers whatsoever.
That's
And
amazing, and the publisher, I'm sure, was so happy with the way
yeah,
this turned out. And you
yeah.
edited your own photos too.
I no, so I did have an editor. I luckily got to only submit the raw images because I probably would have lost my mind if I had to go through and also edit the photos. But I everything else, yeah, was. And my editor was amazing. They kept the colors were so beautiful, and that coffee table book feel was kind of part of what I wanted to feel like, because there's nothing like having a beautiful, pretty book on your table.
Yes, congratulations. It's amazing. And
Thank
what I
you.
really love about this book, especially the day that I open it, once again, like I said, the universe communicates to me by sending me books. One of the things I really enjoy is that you have the technical how to, you have the supply and materials list, but then you also talk about some of the feelings that come up as
Mhm.
we start creating. Can you talk a little bit about what people can expect before they start each exercise? There's quite a few beautiful techniques that you share in here, but then you also have the mindset portion. If you could talk a little bit about the mindset portion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's kind of what and when I pitched this to my publisher, Peg, who's been amazing, it was kind of like I wanted there to be a conversation about mental health in Michael's, in the craft store. I wanted people to be able to normalize this conversation around emotions and not just making it the art process feel kind of robotic with some of the tutorial stuff. So um, every project, every portion of the book has something in there that's going to require or ask of you at least to reflect and to look at, like, how am I showing up in this process? And the only times I've been able to create my best work and consistently show up in a way that felt like I was having a positive relationship with my art was if I was asking myself, like, how am I today? How am I feeling? And so the questions, the reflections that are in here, these are genuinely the questions that have come up through my journaling and through my own thought process around just creating. And when I stall, I have to write. So when I'm in a block, a lot of that comes out. And so it was actually pretty easy to come up with some of that because I had already had it written in other places.
So beautiful. I'm so
Yeah.
excited. And when is this book coming out? Because people have already been asking me, like, where do I order this?
Yeah, yeah. So
And I'll
actually the
include the
book,
link to them.
yeah, no, it's the so it was interesting. People pre-ordered it. You could have pre-ordered it a few months ago. I kind of did a slow trickle pre-order announcement because I didn't want to overwhelm people and have people, sick of hearing about it too much. So we did the pre-order, and then the book actually came out. Official publication date was the 28th, so 2 days ago. So you can order the book, I think, pretty much anywhere books are sold, and we'll start seeing them on shelves in stores in the coming months.
Yay, congratulations. I'm so
Thank
excited for
you.
you. And
Thank
I
you.
can't wait to follow along as it launches and is out there
Yeah,
in the world. Such a good feeling to see your book in the shop. I'm
it
sure
is.
it feels so good now. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for sharing your beautiful story. Before we wrap up, I do have like some rapid round questions for you, but I
Yeah.
also just for our listeners, a lot of our listeners are either navigating a day job or multi-passionate, or maybe just wonder like, what does your week look like? There's such a struggle with creatives, like feeling a certain way, like how many hours should I be creating a day or days a week? And I'd love to highlight all the variety of ways that we all approach our practice. If you could share, like at an average glance, how do you balance your day job with your art practice?
Yeah. Yeah. So I try to do the hardest things first in the morning. I have learned that through the week, every day, it's like get those things that I least want to do done in the morning. And I try to do something creative every single day. And that doesn't have to literally be creating. It could be reading about something creative. It could be having a creative discussion about something. And so having art be a part of every day. And routine. I know that these are things that, and especially as a therapist, like I get kind of bored of saying the same thing over and over again, but we say the same things over and over again because that's how we learn. And so routine, and I am still learning this as a 34-year-old therapist, like that my routine really impacts my day. And so each morning, if I just slip up on one thing that I'm kind of accustomed to doing, it can work the rest of my day. So routine, something creative every day of the week, and then moving my body. And again, another redundant thing that we can hear a lot. But I think, and I actually was listening to another podcast earlier just about how, as artists, we are often in a position where we feel like our brains and our like passion and our creativity have to take the front seat. And so my nutrition, eating, not skipping meals as an artist, or creative, and drinking your water.
I know
um,
it's all like the
yeah.
stuff that doesn't sound sexy, but makes such a huge difference
It,
in
it's
how
it's
we
the deal
feel.
breaker, and then I have the sexiest days, and when I do that, like, I can create. And sometimes, and I think for me too is having, and this is a privilege in being able to work for myself and set these kind of parameters, but taking breaks. Sometimes my breaks, like right now I'm in like a month-long break of painting almost, and that feels really weird. But it's also, I've learned now I'm like on year 6 of being a full-time artist in one way or another. I say full-time, but my clients, they don't often feel like work these days. Um, and so, yeah, I have to, a month-long break isn't that long. When I look at what's going to come out of the next 6 months after that month-long break, it'll be great.
Yeah, amazing. Well, okay, I have just a few this or that quick
Yeah,
rapid round questions. You
sure.
ready?
Yes.
All right. Coffee or tea?
Pete,
Cats or dogs?
dogs,
Books or movies? I feel like I know this one.
books. Yeah.
Morning person or night owl?
Used to be a night owl, but morning now.
Same, same. Sweet or
Yeah.
savory?
Sweet.
Pizza or burger?
Ooh. Nowadays burger. Nowadays burger.
Amazing. And what is your favorite cocktail or mocktail of choice?
Anything with coconut, frozen. Anything at all.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I'm down for that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Jessica, thank you so much for
Thanks.
spending time with me and sharing your beautiful book. Everyone, you can check the show notes and get Find Your Flow anywhere books are sold. And where can people follow you and see your work
Yeah.
and follow along with your journey?
Yeah, so at Jessica Young Art for most platforms. And then my retreat company is at Healing Art Retreats. I think that's it. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much. I am
Yeah.
so excited for you. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks so much, Kat.